Could we see a blockbuster trade between the Winnipeg Jets and the Carolina Hurricanes? The Canes are one of the teams that have been apparently having very high interest and lots of talks with the Jets about Patrik Laine. We'll discuss what kind of deal they might be talking about, and we also have some pretty important signings to discuss today as well. We'll jump into all the latest coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have some news that I want to talk about today. We have a few signings and a trade rumor concerning the Jets and the Canes. Now, first up, we have the signings to look at. We had a pretty significant long-term deal in Columbus with the Blue Jackets announcing that they've signed Danish forward Oliver Bjorkstrand to a 5-year contract extension at $5.4 million annually. That's quite a substantial raise in pay for Bjorkstrand. He has proven to be a pretty consistent winger the past few years, surpassing the 20-goal mark. I would think with the roster the way it is, he's probably going to be able to take on an even more of an offensive role, as they certainly are looking for more offense in Columbus, as we know. So that should be an opportunity for him to continue to get better. Obviously, the contract also comes with a 10-team no-trade list, so that still leaves them lots of opportunity to make a trade if they desire to do so at some point. He does not qualify for that until the second year of the contract, so from years 2 through 5 on the deal, he will have a 10-team no-trade list. But overall, pretty decent contract in my opinion. I mean, he has proven to be a good winger, good goal scorer, so we'll see how things work out longer term, but obviously he's a big part of their future. Now, we also had a contract finally completed between the Nashville Predators and Luke Kunin. Of course, Kunin was acquired from Minnesota earlier in this offseason, was a restricted free agent, and is one of the guys remaining that still was not signed, but they finally come to terms on a deal here today for a 2-year contract, which will pay him $2.3 million annually. Of course, he'll still be a restricted free agent at the end of this contract, but of course, he will have arbitration rights, which will make things much easier the next go-around if they're not able to come to terms on their own. Of course, Kunin should be able to provide them with a pretty good value here for that kind of money. Obviously, he completed his 3-year entry-level contract that's now expired. He's certainly been getting better all the time, and I think the Predators certainly view him as an important piece that they acquired in that trade with Minnesota earlier on. So now that's all settled. And we also saw a signing today with the Anaheim Ducks signing goaltender Anthony Stolarz to a 2-year deal at $950K. That's obviously a pretty decent signing. I'm not sure what his role will be this year. He very well could end up being the third goalie on the taxi squad. He could play for their AHL team. But this accomplishes a couple of things. They obviously needed to have another goalie signed for beyond the current season for expansion draft purposes. So this will kind of satisfy their need and what they have to have available to the Seattle team in that regard. Also gives them an extra guy who's, he's been around the NHL for some time, battled a ton of injuries earlier on, so he doesn't nearly have the game experience that he normally would have at his age, but he's done pretty well in the American Hockey League too, so this is by no means is a bad signing. Certainly should give them extra depth and more value at the goaltending position in Anaheim. He's been there already for a little while, so someone they're already familiar with. And like I said, more than anything else, it satisfies what they have to expose in the expansion draft here as well. So not something they'll have to really figure out here at a later time. Now, as I mentioned as well, we had some information today from the fourthperiod.com, which is not really the first time we've kind of heard some rumors around the Hurricanes being involved in Laine trade talks, but obviously it goes to show that it's something they're still very interested in, and still something that the two teams have been having talks off and on here really throughout the offseason. So essentially, the Carolina Hurricanes are very interested in acquiring the top Finnish scoring winger for Winnipeg, who we know has made it pretty clear that he'd like a change of scenery. And even though he reported to training camp and did some media the other day, you could tell that he really felt awkward and was kind of not really wanting to be there. But at the same time, he knows he's going to fulfill his contract, and he's certainly going to do that if he ends up staying in Winnipeg for the remainder of the season. But the two teams have certainly been having talks. Of course, reuniting him with Finnish centerman Sebastian Aho, I think from the Canes' perspective, would be a terrific addition. I mean, they've already got some younger guys like Svechnikov, for example, Aho, Niederreiter, Turbo. They've got some good young group of forwards there. Adding a guy like Laine would really be a major addition by the Hurricanes. So clearly, they're interested. And now the stumbling block here is the Jets' asking price. Now, what Dave Pagnotta of the fourthperiod.com is reporting, that essentially Winnipeg wants one of their top right shot defensemen in 26-year-old Brett Pesce, who comes with 4 more years on a pretty reasonable contract. So that part is appealing to Winnipeg. Of course, Pesce, one of the better two-way defensemen in the NHL, certainly really solid on his own end. Doesn't always get the attention or the credit he sometimes deserves, but he's a really solid, stay-at-home kind of guy. The Hurricanes have had an abundance of defensemen for a while now, and he's a name that keeps coming up for what other teams are looking for, but not somebody that the Hurricanes are overly eager to part with, because they certainly see him as being a pillar on that right side of their defense. And of course, the other piece that the Jets are looking for is a young center/winger, Martin Necas. Now, of course, they probably see Necas as being a really viable solution long-term to be their number 2 center behind Mark Scheifele. So that would be a pretty good package in return. Now, that may not be exactly the parts involved, but those would be the main pieces going either way. So obviously the Hurricanes, though, are apparently kind of a little gun-shy here to pull the trigger and make the deal happen. Now, they have to understand, though, I would think that if you're going to get a value in a guy like Laine, you're going to have to give up value. Now, of course, the Jets have had their blue line really, kind of battered here in the last year or so. Getting a guy like Pesce to really solidify things would be huge, and getting that long-term number 2 center in Necas, who could be a really solid offensive player for them as well, would be a great addition. That's the main pieces that we know Winnipeg's going to be looking for. But from the Carolina perspective as well, obviously giving up Pesce is not something they're crazy about, which I certainly understand. But they also need to get the other right shot defenseman, Dougie Hamilton, signed to a longer-term extension. He's made it clear he wants to stay. They seem to make it clear that they're very interested in keeping him, but they need to work out an extension that way. But besides Hamilton and Pesce, of course, the right side kind of starts to get a little bit weaker after that. But, you do have a guy like Hayden Fleury, for example, who can also play the right side. The left side, they have some other options as well, including Jacob Slavin, who's their top left shot defenseman. You got Brady Shea. Of course, you also have like a Jake Gardner. You still have a guy like Jake Bean in the mix as well. Like, to me, as much as trading Pesce would not be ideal for them, to get a guy like Laine, I would really think that would be something they would want to really take advantage of myself. Like I said, they're going to have to give up something of substantial value to bring in something of substantial value. Now, the Philadelphia Flyers are another team, according to Pagnota and other sources that I've seen, that are really, really interested here as well. But, and again, a case where they kind of want to take a wait-and-see approach here before they really get too firm into making something significant happen. But back to Carolina, though, like Carolina's cap situation is something they need to be cautious of. They have some other players, like an Andrei Svechnikov, is going to need a new deal. He's going towards the end of his entry-level contract, so obviously they need to get that extension worked out. As I mentioned, Dougie Hamilton needs a new extension, and Laine is only 1 year away from needing another extension, and he's going to be looking ideally for a lot of term and a lot of money, and they may not be able to squeeze all of that in. They're not going to want to give up a substantial price for 1 year of Patrik Laine. So he wouldn't be unrestricted, but if they had too hard a time signing him, then they'd be in the same predicament that Winnipeg is kind of in right now as well, where he kind of wants out and, longer term. If he does stay in Winnipeg, I don't know if he goes beyond the current contract or how things kind of get from there, because, it seems pretty clear that, based on his comments from his agent, and in fact he hasn't denied any of it, that they all feel involved that he really should get a fresh start somewhere else and get what he wants somewhere else. So would we see a big trade between the Jets and the Hurricanes? It does make a lot of sense to me. I know, really dating way back to the beginning of the Patrik Laine saga, when rumors first surfaced about his potential availability, or the fact that not only would he possibly want out, that they might be consider shopping him. The Canes have been a team, along with teams like the Flyers and Columbus, as emerging as the teams that seem to be kicking the most tires and showing the most interest here. And I certainly don't understand in a way why Carolina would be so gun-shy to make this happen. Getting Laine would be absolutely a huge addition there, but I do understand the cap perspective they need to be concerned about, as well as losing Brett Pesce. But if you're Carolina and this is the offer for Laine, do you make that trade? And if you're Winnipeg, is that a sufficient enough return? Do you think that's a possible deal that works for both sides? Like I said, there could be some other smaller parts involved, maybe some draft picks, a prospect or something to that effect, but those are the main pieces involved that are being discussed between the two franchises here right now. So we'll see if the talks continue, and if the Carolina Hurricanes get a little bit more eager to pull this off and make it happen. We very well could see some more deals based on how the season starts for both these franchises as well. Obviously, if the Jets get off to a slower start, if the Carolina Hurricanes want to make a big addition at the deadline, or depending on how the season is going for both sides, it is certainly something that we could see happen maybe sooner than later. Obviously, the price tags could change a little bit, and if one team gets more eager than the other to make it happen, they might have incentive to sweeten the deal just a little bit more. So let me know your thoughts on this potential deal, and we'll talk about it further down in the comment section. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.